from no throne, no crown, just a species that wouldn't let the galaxy die alone. The stars were going out, not fading over billions of years, not dying natural deaths. They were vanishing, whole sectors of the galaxy falling silent, as if erased. First, it was just a few systems. Then entire civilizations lost contact. Then history itself began to break apart, overwritten by something no one understood. They called it the Fade. Not a weapon, not an army, just silence. Deep and cold and final. Humanity had heard the rumors through fractured transmissions and dying signals. Reports from ancient empires, some 1,000,000 years older than Earth's first satellites, claiming they had seen it coming. They had watched. The darkness reached toward them like an invisible tide. And then they had simply vanished. Their records turned to static. Their light gone. At the edge of known space, humanity listened. They were not a mighty species in galactic terms. Earth's entry into the stars had come late. By the time humans built their first interstellar engines, entire councils of alien powers already ruled sectors. Humanity was curious, chaotic, and persistent, but no one feared them. No one expected much from them either. And yet, when the last known signal from the Solari Dominion was received, an empire of scholars wiped out overnight, humans did not retreat. They did not close their borders. Instead, they listened. They traced that signal to a broken satellite drifting near a dying sun, and they answered. The message had been short, a plea, a record of everything the Solari knew about the Fade, their star charts, their myths, their warnings. It had ended with 4 simple words: save what you can. So they tried. The United Earth Coalition gathered what resources they could. Not warships, there was no enemy to fight, but science vessels, freighters, automated drones. They called it Project Ark. At first, the galaxy laughed. Humanity, the youngest race, trying to play guardian to empires older than its continents. But the humans didn't argue. They simply began. They sent teams to orphaned planets where ghost cities still floated above cracked oceans. They retrieved memory cores from derelict stations. They offered refuge to scattered survivors who had lost their species, their culture, their worlds. And one by one, the laughter stopped. Not because humanity suddenly became powerful, but because they didn't stop. Where other species sealed themselves in safe zones, humans went further into the dark. Where others abandoned systems, humans landed and searched. Where others mourned what was lost, humans preserved what remained, and always the Fade crept closer. It didn't come with noise or warning. A sector would simply stop responding. Even data streams vanished. It was as if reality itself thinned and then disappeared. Maps had to be redrawn daily. Coordinates no longer pointed anywhere. Some explorers reported seeing stars dim and vanish in real time, not behind distant light. Years, but here and now, as if the universe was blinking, slowly. Captain Alara Dorn, a former shipyard engineer turned expedition leader, stood at the edge of a fading system aboard her vessel, Calypso's Hope. She watched the sun ahead shimmer like a dying flame. Her ship's instruments, reliable for years, were beginning to misread mass and time. "Telemetry's bending," said her pilot, Jonah Reeve. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before the whole gravity well collapses." Ilara didn't look. Away. "Then we make them count." The ice winds of Terrell 6 howled as the 2 dropships touched down, their landing gear crunching into frost-covered ruins. The planet had once been home to the Volari Union, a peaceful species known for their crystalline cities and memory-sharing rituals. Now it was a graveyard. Towering spires lay broken, half buried beneath ash and ice, their beauty lost to time. "Captain, Ilara Dorn watched the live feed from the landing teams. Her breath caught as the camera panned over the ruins, jagged, glittering shards of ancient artistry, dimmed by centuries of decay. They had maybe 10 minutes before the solar readings dropped too low to keep a safe orbit. The fade was coming. "Team Alpha, report status," she said into the comm. "Found the vault entrance," came the reply. "It's intact. Looks like it was sealed when the power failed." "Break it open," Ilara said. "No damage to the contents." Jonah, still at the helm, glanced back at her. "We've pushed our luck a dozen times, Ilara. How long do we keep this up before it catches? Us?" She didn't answer immediately. She knew the risks. The galaxy had already judged them reckless for launching Project Ark, humanity's desperate effort to rescue what remained of fading civilizations. No one else dared go this close to fade zones. No one else thought it worth the cost. But they weren't doing this for glory or strategy. They were doing it because no one else would. "We hold the line," she said finally. "We bring something back, even if it's just a name." Jonah nodded. That was all the answer he needed. On the surface, the vault cracked open with a hiss. Inside, glowing threads of crystal hummed softly, a neural archive. Valari knowledge, songs, language, and memory. It was beautiful, 1,000 lifetimes preserved in fractal light. The science officer handling the archive let out a stunned breath. "It's alive. Their whole history. Still here." Ilara's voice came through the comm, calm and steady. "Download everything you can. 5 minutes to departure." Data flowed into portable drives, the light of the archive pulsing faster as if aware it was being remembered. Then the seismic alert sounded. The fade was approaching. The wind outside stopped. The ash froze in midair. Time itself seemed to slow. The sun above, already dim, began to flicker like a candle in a vacuum. "Get out of there!" Ilara ordered. The team scrambled back to the dropships carrying the crystal cores. As they lifted off, the surface of Tyrell 6 began to ripple, not explode, not collapse. It simply softened. Buildings melted into the ground without heat. The horizon darkened and then vanished entirely. The ships soared back toward Calypso's. Hope. Engines burning hot. Ilara didn't breathe until they were safely aboard. The moment the bay doors sealed, she turned to the ship's AI. "Get us out of here. Jump as soon as we're clear." "Acknowledged," the AI replied. Calypso's hope surged forward, pushing just beyond the edge of the system. In the rear, cameras Tyrell 6 vanished, not destroyed, not consumed, gone, as if it had never been there. But the Valari memories were not lost. Humanity had saved them. Back at the Ark archive orbiting Mars, engineers and translators worked around the clock to decode the data. The Valari's entire culture was slowly brought back to life, not as a species, but as knowledge. And soon, a song unlike any ever sung on Earth echoed through the station's speakers. The Valari remembrance chant, haunting, gentle, grateful. News spread. Across the remaining star systems, scattered survivors began to listen. Some mocked it as a futile effort. Others wept. One species with no empire, no fleet, and no seat on the old councils had done what the great powers refused. They remembered. Ilara received a message from a distant outpost days later. A race called the Kareen, nearly extinct, asked if Project Ark would come for them. She stared at the screen, heart heavy and hopeful. Jonah stood beside her. "Still think we're crazy?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Absolutely. But now we're not alone." They set course for the Kareen system, because when the stars began to fall, humanity didn't run. They reached out. The Kareen system was already dim when Calypso's hope arrived. Its once vibrant sun had dulled to a reddish hue, its outer layers thinning in unnatural ways. Readings showed distortions in space-time and localized drops in data integrity, early signs of the fade. The countdown had begun. Captain Ilara Dorn stood on the bridge, reviewing orbital scans. The Kareen had once lived across 4 moons, each with dense jungles, flowing lakes, and open-air cities of spire-like towers. Now only one moon, Skyle 3, showed any signs of life. Barely. Local comms are weak, Jonah reported. No formal response to our hails, but there's movement down there. Heat signatures. They're alive. Ilara nodded. Prep the landers. We go in quiet. The Kareen were an ancient reptilian species, resilient, proud, and once fiercely independent. Historical records said they refused offers of alliance from larger empires, confident in their isolation. That same isolation had left them alone when the Fade began to take their neighboring systems. Now they were on the edge of extinction, as the dropship descended through the planet's atmosphere. Ilara stared at the landscape below. The jungle canopy was sparse, brown instead of green. The rivers were drying, and the towers, beautiful in their construction, stood cracked and crumbling. We're picking up faint energy signatures, said Dr. Ramy, the mission's lead xenobiologist. Someone's using old tech, possibly geothermal power routed to shelters underground. They followed the signal to a low, vine-covered structure built into the side of a hill. It was silent at first, and then the doors groaned open. What stepped out were not warriors, but elders. Their scales had dulled, their eyes heavy with loss. Yet when they saw the humans, they didn't run or raise weapons. Instead, they simply bowed. One elder, leaning on a carved staff, spoke through a translator. You are late, he said, but not too late. Ilara stepped forward. We're here to help. If you'll come with us, we can get you to safety, off-world. We have food, medical care, shelter. The elder shook his head. We do not run, she frowned. Then why call for us? He looked past her toward the gray sky. To give you this, he motioned, and younger Kareen stepped forward carrying a crystalline tablet inscribed with glowing runes. It's our knowledge, the elder explained. Our stories, our science, our failures and hopes. We knew no one would come to save us, so we prepared this. A gift to those who still fight. We are not meant to leave Scale 3, but perhaps we can live through you. Ilara took the tablet, holding it with care. You can still come with us. The elder smiled faintly. Our roots are too deep. We do not fear the end, only being forgotten. She didn't argue further. Not every mission was about saving lives. Some were about saving meaning. They returned to the ship with the Kareen archive. As the lander rose, the elders stood silently, watching the skies. No fear, only peace. Back. On Calypso's Hope, the tablet was placed in a containment vault beside the Valari archive. Dr. Ramy began the process of decoding it, already impressed by the complexity of the Kareen language and the depth of their ecological wisdom. They had entire philosophies based on rivers, he said, scanning one of the data strings. They believed knowledge should flow like water, shared freely, but shaped by the land it touches. Jonah, sitting nearby, looked out the viewport at the shrinking moon. They didn't want us to fight for them, he murmured. They wanted us to remember them. Ilara replied, they knew they couldn't stop the Fade, but they chose not to die in silence. She added the Kareen's name to the growing list of rescued legacies. The next message came before they could rest. A signal from a drifting ship outside charted space. A single word pulsed in every galactic language. Help. Without pause, Calypso's hope changed course. Humanity had no throne, no crown, but it had fire in its heart, and it would carry every spark it could find into the void. The transmission came from an ancient station in orbit around a rogue planet, cold, sunless, and drifting between stars. It was a relic from the old age of the galaxy, long abandoned, now reactivated for one final gathering. The remaining major powers, those not yet consumed by the Fade, had called a meeting. They called it the Last Council. Calypso's Hope arrived at the edge of the system, its human crew greeted with formal silence. There were no ceremonial welcomes, no grandeur, only grim necessity. Over a dozen alien species were present. Most of their home worlds had already been lost. Their fleets were fractured, their leadership broken. What remained were representatives, caretakers of fading legacies. Captain Ilara Dorn walked through the vast, dimly lit council chamber, flanked by Jonah and Dr. Rami. The chamber had once hosted peace treaties and technological exchanges. Now, its central table was marked by flickering holograms and darkened nameplates. Many seats were empty. A figure from the Jolkai, a crystalline life form, stood and spoke. "We are gathered to decide if anything remains worth preserving." Another, from the Mirren Ascendancy, leaned forward. "The Fade consumes not only stars, but meaning. Records vanish, cultures unravel. What point is there in struggling?" Ilara remained quiet, listening as delegates debated options. Some wanted to withdraw further, retreating into stasis and isolation. Others considered sacrificing sectors to buy time. One proposed launching all remaining energy into a final beacon, an effort to signal another galaxy for help, even if the odds were microscopic. When the conversation turned to humanity's efforts, the room shifted. "You send ships into the Fade zones," said a representative from the Gorelli Combine. "You risk extinction to save memories. Why? You have no empire to protect." Ilara stood. The room fell silent. She didn't speak from a prepared speech, and she didn't ask for permission. "We don't have a throne or a crown," she began. "But we do have a choice. The galaxy is not just stars and borders. It's people, stories, songs. If the Fade erases everything, then what's left of us? We're not here to win a war. We're here to make sure the galaxy isn't forgotten." A pause. Then she added, voice steady, "If we can't stop the dark, then we'll carry the light, even if it's only for a little longer." Some scoffed. Others looked away. But a few listened. Really listened. The Jolkai representative bowed slightly. "You would preserve the memory of strangers, even those who once saw you as lesser." "We already are," Ilara replied. Later, in the station's private hangar, a representative from the Orcsan hegemony approached her. A tall, insectoid species known for their disciplined logic and cold diplomacy, the Orcsan were rarely sentimental. "Our archives are failing," the representative said without greeting. "We have knowledge we cannot safely store anymore. Would your people safeguard it?" Ilara nodded without hesitation. "We will." One by one, others followed. Some gave entire databases. Others offered samples of art, music, genetic seeds, and religious texts. It was not an alliance. It was a surrender of legacy to those most willing to carry it. Project Ark grew tenfold that day. As Calypso's Hope departed, Dr. Rami marveled at the transfer logs. "We just became the last library of the galaxy," Jonah added quietly. "No pressure." Ilara stood at the viewport, watching the station shrink behind them. "We didn't come for permission. We came to do what must be done." She didn't know if the Fade could ever be stopped, but she knew this. If the galaxy was going to fall, humanity would hold its story until the final page, and they would write their own as they did. The ship drifted in darkness, alone in uncharted space. It had no designation, no beacon, no recognizable markings. It did not belong to any known civilization. Its design was jagged, as though grown rather than built, its surface shimmering, with a strange pattern that shifted under every scanner the humans pointed at it. Calypso's Hope approached cautiously, engines humming low. The message that had summoned them, just one word, help, had come from this place. But now there was only silence. Inside the command deck, Captain Ilara Dorn studied the ghost ship's image on the screen. "It's not abandoned," said Jonah quietly. "Life support is still running. Power flow is active. But no life signs," Dr. Rami added. "Not in the traditional sense." Ilara made her decision. "Suit up. We board." They crossed the void in a small shuttle, docking with the derelict ship's outer airlock. As they entered, it became immediately clear. This wasn't just a ship, it was a relic, a shell of something once living. Its walls pulsed faintly with energy, and strange symbols glowed in unpredictable intervals. Then a voice, soft, layered and echoing, spoke through the comms. "Curious. You enter the dark willingly." Jonah spun toward the source. "That's not coming from the ship's systems." "It's in our minds," said Rami. "Projected. Telepathic, maybe. It's something else." Ilara stepped forward. "We heard a distress call." The voice replied, "I called to see if anyone still would." From the floor ahead, a figure rose, not out of shadows, but seemingly from reality itself. Its form was humanoid, but vague, as if sketched by memory and unfinished thought. Its skin flickered like static, and its eyes reflected not light, but the absence of it. "I was born from the first world that faded," it said. "A fragment, a remnant. I am the memory the fade left behind." Rami gasped. "It's not part of the fade, it's something left after." The figure nodded. "The fade does not consume. It unravels, removes the thread, not the cloth. I am what slipped through." Ilara frowned. "Then why reach out?" "To understand you," it said. "You do not run. You do not forget. You remember. You resist." Its form shimmered. "The fade has no mind, no intention. But I was shaped by the echoes of those who died afraid, alone. I should be hollow, yet you awaken something strange in me." There was a pause. Ilara asked, "Can you stop it?" The figure lowered its head. "No, but I can warn. Show you where it grows next. My presence disturbs its rhythm. For now." It extended an arm. A beam of light unfolded in space, revealing a map, one filled with flickering systems, each on the brink of being lost. "You are not the last," it whispered. "But you are the loudest. Your memory carries weight." Ilara took the map. "Then we'll act on it. We'll go to the next system. Save what we can." The figure flickered. Again. "I will guide when I can, but beware, the fade is beginning to notice you." As the team returned to Calypso's Hope, Ilara held the new star chart in her hand. The crew was quiet. Even Jonah had no quip this time. "A being made of remnants," Rami murmured. "And it wanted to understand us." Ilara nodded. "Because we're the only ones who still remember how to fight for what matters." Jonah looked at her. "So what now?" She tapped the new coordinates into the ship's system. "Now we follow the map. There are still stories to save." As Calypso's Hope turned toward the edge of known space once more, the figure on the derelict ship watched them vanish into the void, and for the first time in its long, fragmented existence, it felt hope. It started with a signal relay, one of Earth's deep space listening posts, now orbiting an evacuated world near the Galactic. RIM began transmitting more than just archive packets. It began broadcasting songs, stories, voices in every language it had cataloged. At first, it was meant as comfort for scattered refugees. But then, something unexpected happened. The fade slowed. Not everywhere. Just slightly, just barely, in a few isolated systems. But the change was real. Ilara stood in Calypso's Hope's main operations deck as the data scrolled across the holographic display. You're saying broadcasting memory, just transmitting it, is affecting the Fade? She asked. Dr. Rami looked stunned. We think it reacts to patterns. The Fade erases. But when we project a memory strongly enough, especially in the form of emotion, story, and shared meaning, it resists. It's like memory has weight, light. Jonah leaned on the railing, watching the shifting star charts. So, you're saying we can shine at it, and it'll back off? In the right conditions, yes, Rami replied. It's not a weapon, it's a message, one the Fade doesn't know how to erase quickly. Ilara stepped forward. Then, we build more. That was the birth of the torch array. It wasn't a weapon platform or a fleet. It was a series of beacons built from the remnants of mining rigs, observation satellites, even old pleasure cruisers. Each one was equipped with powerful broadcast cores, loaded with the stories of dying civilizations, the Valari's crystalline, songs, the Kareen's river philosophies, the Solari's final messages, and Earth's own music and myths. Humanity called for volunteers. They came, not just from Earth, but from the scattered survivors of other species who still believed in something more than hiding. The torchbearers. They were not soldiers. They were engineers, linguists, poets, pilots, archivists. They carried no weapons, just history, just memory. Ilara stood aboard one of the early torch stations, watching the Fade's edge shimmer in the black distance. The beacon beside her glowed with soft golden light, pulsing in time with a broadcasted lullaby sung by 3 separate species. Signal strength is holding, came the voice of the station AI. Local Fade movement has paused. Jonah's voice crackled through the comms from orbit. You're really doing it, Ilara. Holding the dark back with stories. She smiled faintly. Not me. All of us. Across the galaxy, more torches were launched. Each one lit a path into the darkness. Systems once deemed lost began to echo again with transmissions, even if only briefly. For some, it gave time to evacuate. For others, it gave peace in their final days. But with light came attention. The Fade began to shift its pattern. It no longer ignored humanity's ships. Strange energy surges began to target the torches directly. 3 were lost within a week. Still, they kept building. Ilara addressed the crew of Calypso's Hope, her voice steady despite the tension mounting across known space. They will fall. Some will burn. We may lose every last torch. But as long as one still shines, the galaxy will remember, Jonah added quietly. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and way out of our depth. But we've got a fleet of storytellers. Who else can? Say that? The crew laughed, and then fell silent as the next coordinates came in. A star cluster deep within the Fade's approach zone. Once home to the Ursatai, now silent. Set course, Ilara said. As they jumped, the newest torch lit. Behind them, its light slow and steady, pulsing with 1,000 voices. Humanity had no empire, but it had become the keeper of the galaxy's soul. The Fade did not strike like a storm. It seeped. Across the edge of known space, once stable systems began to fracture without warning. Communications warped, coordinates unraveled. Some ships never arrived at their destinations, their paths bending, in ways no math could explain. Where once the torch array held ground, now entire sections fell silent again. The Fade was learning. Captain Ilara Dorn stood in the war room of Calypso's Hope. The torch array's master map now littered with blinking red sectors. A dozen stations were dark. Hundreds of refugees were cut off. The galaxy's last light was flickering. She pointed to a cluster of systems near the center of the array. If we lose this corridor, we lose the chain. We'll be isolated one sector at a time. Jonah leaned. over the console, eyes scanning the data. Too many to evacuate, too far to reinforce, and we've got no combat support. Dr. Rami stepped forward. What if we don't evacuate? What if we stay? Not to fight, but to hold. As long as the torches stay online, they still delay the fade. Elara met his gaze. You're suggesting we dig in, risk everything to buy time? He nodded. We've saved stories, cultures. Now we have to save the signal. Elara turned to the crew. We hold the line until the last light fades or until something changes. What followed wasn't a war. It was a series of desperate stands. Torchbearers, scattered across vulnerable systems, reinforced their stations with every tool they had. Makeshift shielding, improvised energy dampeners, and signal amplifiers powered by decaying stars. They weren't soldiers, but they stood their posts like guardians. On the torch station called Beacon 27, an aging Gorelli engineer named Tassan locked himself in the central core. When the fade reached his sector, he used his own body's energy field to manually stabilize the signal. The station held for 10 more hours, enough to evacuate a nearby colony. He didn't survive, but his name was recorded in the torch. The Ilari system, once home to an aquatic civilization, the last surviving pod of their species, sang into the oceans beneath the frozen surface, while the torch above broadcasted their tones across the stars. The fade swallowed the planet, but the song was heard and preserved. On Calypso's Hope, the crew worked non-stop to coordinate relief and reroute signals. Jonah operated without sleep. Rami lost contact with a team of translators he'd trained. Himself. And Elara? Elara barely spoke, her focus locked on keeping the array alive. Then came the signal from Spirit of Kepler, a retrofitted colony ship once used to ferry survivors, now stranded deep inside a failing sector. Its captain was a former teacher, its crew mostly families. The ship had no chance of escape. We can stabilize the array node here, the message said. We can keep the signal going, but we'll be out of time. Elara tried to reply, to offer alternatives. But the response was calm, final. You gave us hope. You made us part of something greater. Let us return that gift. The spirit of Kepler stayed behind. The torch it held broadcasted for 26 more hours, keeping the corridor stable long enough to preserve thousands more. It went dark without a sound. Elara stood at the bridge window, watching the stars. We're losing. People, Jonah said gently. I know. We can't do this forever. No, she agreed. But we can do it long enough. The map was still alight. Dimmer than before, fractured in places. But alive. And in the silence between broadcasts, a new signal pulsed faintly. One that hadn't originated from Earth or any known species. The fade was changing. Something inside it hesitated. And the light, though flickering, still held. Humanity had drawn a line, and they would not let the dark cross it. Not while any voice still spoke. It had been over a year since the first torch went live. A year of fire and shadow, of holding ground and losing it. Of hope found in the ashes, and of new worlds lost in the same breath. The battle for memory was far from over, but humanity had done something no one had ever expected. They had become the guardians of the galaxy's soul. But there was no grand victory, no banners or celebrations. The galaxy was still dying, and the fade was relentless. Yet the stories carried on, even when the light of the torches began to dim. Elara stood alone in the observation deck of Calypso's Hope, her hands resting on the glass as she gazed out at the vastness of space. A faint glow marked the location of the nearest torch, struggling but holding steady. The fade had never been defeated, but something was shifting. Where it had once consumed systems like wildfire, now there were signs of resistance. The presence of the torches, of the message humanity had sent was being felt, even in the depths of the Fade's reach. "We're not going to stop it," Jonah said, stepping up beside her. "But we're making it rethink itself." Ilara nodded, though the weight of their efforts still bore down on her. "We're not fighting the Fade, not directly. We're fighting the fear. The idea that it can take everything and leave nothing, that's where we're winning." In the days that followed, the rest of the galaxy seemed to wake up to what humanity had achieved. The fading civilizations of the galaxy had not just been saved, they had been redefined. They were no longer simply memories. They had become the foundation of something new. The races that had once fled or abandoned the galaxy began to return. The systems that had fallen silent began to stir with life. They came not for conquest or control, but for connection, for something beyond survival. The archives of humanity, its history, its songs, its dreams, became the touchstone for these new alliances. The torch array was not just a lifeline now, it was a framework for rebuilding. And as Calypso's hope moved from one sector to the next, Ilara and her crew received more and more visitors, not refugees, not survivors, but delegates. Delegates of races that had once seen humanity as insignificant, now eager to learn from them, to share their stories. One such visitor arrived aboard a ship from the Signia Reach, a race that had once built their entire empire on technology, only to fall to the Fade when their reliance on machine over soul left them vulnerable. The leader of the Signia, an elderly woman named Illyra, stepped onto the deck of Calypso's Hope with a smile. "You are the flame in the dark, Captain Dorn," she said, her voice warm. "You've taught us that the greatest light is not the one that burns the brightest, but the one that never flickers out." Ilara simply bowed her head, acknowledging the respect of someone who had lived through the Fade, who had seen it take entire cultures, yet had found hope in the light humanity had sparked. "This galaxy isn't gone yet," Ilara said quietly. "And as long as it's still here, we're going to protect what matters." In the distance, the stars burned, scattered across a sky no longer completely lost to shadow. The Fade would never leave, but the galaxy would no longer die alone. It would fight, it would remember, and it would carry those memories forward. The work was far from done, but humanity had done more than survive. They had given the galaxy something it had nearly lost, a reason to keep going. As the lights of the torches flickered across the darkness, the last song began to play, and it was one that everyone, no matter how far from home, could sing together. In the cold void of space, with no throne and no crown, humanity had done something far greater. They had become the heart of the galaxy, and no matter how dark the stars became, their light would never go out.